So Sunderland picked up a win against Accrington Stanley on Tuesday night. That's our first of the season. Drew against Ipswich at the weekend, which was fair to say, a good point on the balance of things. So we're going to talk about both them games and preview what is now our derby game, almost, even though we're at opposite ends of the country. It's our biggest rivalry anyway, Portsmouth. But we'll start with Ipswich. Poor first half, it's fair to say. I don't think anybody would disagree with that, but manager changed at half time. Four at the back seemed to do the trick. We got the equaliser through Lyndon Gooch. What was your overall thoughts of the game, Nick?
Overall, you sort of summed it up quite nicely. You know, poor first half, recovered in the second half, and a point away at Ipswich Town in the context of the division is probably not a bad point. I mean, I look back to last season and going to Luton Town and getting a point at Luton in the second game of the season, and a lot of people saying that was a game that they should have won, and but with hindsight, a point at Luton Town turned out to be a very good point. I think a point at Ipswich, who are provisionally on paper one of the early season favourites to go back up, you'd have to say is a good point. Of course, it was overshadowed by what happened the week before in the home game with Oxford. That 1-1 draw, in a way, was a sort of a spectre over the game at Ipswich, and it clouded whatever was going to happen at Portman Road. And because it was such a poor first half, I think it elevated that spectre into an even greater sort of demon for Sunderland. But I was disappointed in the first half, there's no question. I mean, they were all over the place. They were all over the shop in terms of people, playing in that formation of three at the back and the wing backs. I don't think it's worked. It's not something I hope that they pursue, because I just don't think at the moment Sunderland got the personnel to play it. And with Hume suffering as he did on Saturday at Portman Road, even more reason not to pursue it, because you just haven't got the bodies to look solid at the back. And then going to Accrington playing 4 and winning 3-1 and pushing on at the end of the game, looking like they could score more than 3. I think that sort of underlines that's got to change. But overall, I think in the perspective of the season as a whole, a point at Ipswich Town is a good point.
And Martin, do you think the last 3 halves of football we've played, we've had 4 at the back, been much better than the first 3 halves of football we've played this season? Do you think the manager's probably going to stick with a 4 at the back rather than a 3 going forward?
Well, I hope so, but I mean, I think the bigger picture for the fans and the overall sort of vibe that was going around the club is, obviously we had like a really short summer. Everyone was gutted about the fact that we didn't go up, and we needed just to start the season ready with a spark, and we failed to do that. We kind of brought in a formation that hasn't worked, so I think it's vital that we kind of play to our strengths. I think if he'd signed players that would play that system, then I could totally understand it, but obviously it hasn't worked, and I think it's time to sort of say, right, okay, I've used the 4 pre-season games, I used that 6 weeks of preparation to do it. The players that we've got are at this level. I mean, weirdly, historically, when he first said he was going to do it, mates of mine said, "Do you think it'll work?" And I was like, "No." And they were like, "Why?" And I said, "Because historically, it's something whenever we've done that, changed to what's seen as almost like a clever formation, it's never worked." Now that's not a scientific answer, but for some strange reason, it just never has, and it hasn't. And I guess he could now be bullish and stick with it. But weirdly enough, I would say if we were going to play 3, Portsmouth would be the type of game that we should play it, because we struggled against them in the air last year. But I think after the last 2 games, it would be insane. It would be insane to play it. I think if he'd signed a massive centre half in the summer, in some wide players who are used to playing in a back 5, if Oviedo was still here, then it might work. I think it's been unfair, and Denver Hume, it's probably knocked his development back at least 6 months. And because he's the only left back at the club, it'd be interesting to see what he does on Saturday. But I think it's now a crucial game. It always was going to be after Ipswich. Obviously we've beat Accrington, but it doesn't put any points on the board. It just gives us an extra game in August, which makes it 8 games in August now or something.
Games, yeah.
So
3 weeks on the trot to
in a way, we probably don't want that, but it was great to win. We needed that win, and it was good that there was goals coming from the attacking positions. I think it shows how important Aidan McGeady is to the team. He was playing when he wasn't fully fit, and now he's looking sharper You can see what he picks up, intercepts the ball pretty much on the halfway line and walks through an entire League One defence. We haven't got another player who can do that apart from maybe Maguire. So yeah, I think sort of going into this game, it's vital that we get the win. And if we were to lose, it would be seen as a bad start of the season because it would be 2 points from 9. That's not promotion form. And if we were to draw 1-1, then we would have drawn 3 games 1-1, like we did a lot last year. So I think we really need to beat Portsmouth to kind of like spark the season, and I think we're capable of doing it. I think we are better than them.
I couldn't handle the memes if it was 1-1.
No, I mean, please, I don't want another 1-1. And anecdotally, going back to the 3 at the back, and funny enough, Bobby Robson, because I was thinking of Ipswich, and it reminded me of it. When Bobby was at Newcastle, I remember he went to play 3 at the back, and every week he played his 3 at the back, and within 20 minutes Newcastle were 2-0 down, and it got to a point where he goes 3 at the back at Spurs one day, and everyone said, this isn't going to end in tears, it'll be 2-0 after 20 minutes, 2-0 down. And I think it was Simon Rushworth at the time who wrote a piece in the Journal criticising the system, saying this doesn't work. It was obvious to all. Bobby actually called a press conference specially to drag all the journalists in with flip charts, the works, to tell us why 3 at the back worked and what he was trying to do. And following week he went to 4. Doesn't work.
Yeah. It works if you've got the personnel.
It's the personnel, and you're right. They've not got it at the moment. I mean, Ozturk impressed me last night at Accrington. When he's fit, he's someone who can slot into that system, I think. But I think Willis got a bit exposed and Flanagan got horribly exposed. Yeah. So I just don't think it's...
I think it is a shame, because I think if we'd kind of... Obviously hindsight's a wonderful thing, but I think if we'd kind of like put in a functional performance against Oxford, which we didn't, and beat them 1-0, we would have been off to a good start, and it would have like exercised some demons of, like the way the last season ended, and then we went on, but instead all the preparation was about this 3 at the back, pre-season games. You could say, was there enough games? And then already it's not worked, which has kind of like put us on the back foot a bit. And people, I mean, obviously if you go on Twitter, you'd think that the world was about to end as far as Sunderland Football Club was concerned. But like, I think the fans needed sort of like something positive to hang on to, and hopefully they'll get it against Portsmouth on Saturday.
On that game, if McNulty had scored early on, if that the keeper hadn't pulled off what turned out to be a fantastic save, and Sunderland gone 1 up, would we be talking of a completely different scenario now?
We equally could have quite easily lost that game 3-1. Like they picked us off in the second half, like 2 or 3 times where they broke, and we were wide open.
Well, Gary Bennett said to me last night at Accrington after the game, we were discussing on the drive home, and he said, had Sunderland gone 1 up against Accrington and played 3 at the back, he said they'd have lost 2-1. He said, but playing 4 at the back and the formation they used, he said, look at the end, they were pushing on to score again, looking to get 2, 3, 4-1. He said, which wouldn't have happened with the previous system.
I want to talk a little bit about Mark McNulty, because I think he's been the most impressive player in the 3 games so far. Scored his first goal yesterday against Accrington. Set up the goal for Lyndon Gooch as well against Ipswich. Do you think he's been almost a surprise how good he's been? And that's no disrespect to him, but I think fans were looking at Will Grigg saying that he would be the man to lead it forward, but it looks like McNulty's sort of taking that position.
Well, I think he's come from a higher level. It's quite weird, because you don't really get excited about players that we're linked with and signed now that we're a League One club, because you either haven't heard of them or the other League One players. But I think it's proven that if we brought like McLaughlin from the Championship and McNulty, not that they were both playing that regularly, but I think bringing a bit of quality in from those leagues, players that are hungry and still at the peak, then I think that's a good strategy. Because obviously last year we bought some League One players. So we need some people who knew the league, and we brought Baldwin and Flanagan and people like that. And then I think you do need that nous, like Max Power give us it. Will Grigg still hasn't got going, but he knows how to sort of boss that league. We just need him to do it for Sunderland. But I think McNulty now looks like a really good signing, and I think he'll put the pressure. He's already putting the pressure on Will Grigg, and it gives us striking options. And now Charlie Wyke's back, you can sort of say, well, we've got things happening up front, which last year we only really had 2 players who could like mix it up front. But now hopefully we've we've got 3, and I think it was important to have that, whatever system we're playing, I think it was important to have that sort of competition within the squad.
I mean, my caveat to McNulty is I think Dobson's had a good start as well. We can go on to that. But I spoke to Mark McNulty last night after the game, and I mean, I think he's looked sharp from minute one. I mean, he's looked hungry. He's quick. I thought he's a little bit unlucky against Oxford, but I did say to him last night, look, what's your best position in terms of, do you like playing in a 2 up front? I mean, you know, Will Grigg and Charlie Wyker both said when they arrived that they've been used to playing on their own up front. Is McNulty happy to do that? He said, look, the bottom line with him is I need players around me. I need players close to me. And that's been the nub of the problem that Sunderland have had last season. They couldn't get players close enough to Grigg and close enough to Wyke and close enough to whoever was playing up front for them to get the chances that they're going to convert. McNulty thrives on that. And you could see that last night. The goal, you know, wonderful sort of work around the box to get it into him close, and then the chances he set up, the one off the bar. You can see that if he gets players in and around him and the ball to his feet, he'll score goals. And his record suggests, you know, okay, it didn't happen from at Reading, but it certainly worked at Hibs. The games he played, it was 2-1. At Coventry the season before, albeit it was League Two, but you know, you've still got to, whatever level you are, you're still going to score goals. I mean, we saw that last night from Bishop, from Accrington Stanley, dragged out of non-league, thrown in. He missed, 2 or 3. He didn't convert them. McNulty converts them. So I think if he stays fit, there's a real player there. I mean, it's interesting. I've spoke to a few fans beginning of the season talking about the forwards, and they all were bemoaning the fact that Grigg it's not happening, White's not happening, we haven't got anybody else, as though McNulty, because he's a loan signing, doesn't count. But he does. He's here for the season, and at the moment he's the sharpest of the 3 of them.
But I guess we have seen with like season-long loans that people can leave halfway through the season. It's happened like the previous 2 seasons, you know. But yeah, like hopefully, you sometimes think if they do really, really well, that the parent club will want them back.
Well, he doesn't strike me as the sort of character. He doesn't strike me as a Lewis Graben. He doesn't. I mean, to talk to him, he's bubbling, he's enthusiastic, he's loving it. I mean, you can just sense that. And there's a lot of talk about Will Grigg's body language. Does he want to be here? Does he not want to be here? I don't know. But Grigg doesn't sort of convey the same bubbling enthusiasm at the moment that McNulty is.
Yeah, I think
but that's understandable because he's not.
He just needs game time, doesn't he, McNulty, and he's come here and he's happy with it.
Yeah.
I think with Grigg, if you'd speculate that he doesn't want to be here, like what other club would take him who would be bigger than Sunderland in a better position? You know, it's like this is his like remit really, isn't it? You know, he scores goals in League One.
I think the body language is largely because he's not scoring at the moment, and it's
and he wasn't fit last year. You know, when he arrived, he wasn't fit and he wasn't training properly. And you know, I think we know that Jack Ross is a massive. One of his things is if you've come in all week and you've worked hard and you've trained hard, then you're in the team, whether you're arguably not as good a player as somebody else who hasn't trained hard, because that's one of his philosophies, and that's fair enough. And maybe that's why Grigg hasn't featured as much as he should have. He's like come on and been subbed. But I would say if you look at other players that we've had who have been like natural finishers, you know, Darren Bent, Kevin Phillips, Jermaine Defoe, if they scored 3 goals in a game, they'd miss 3 chances as well. Yeah. I can't really remember Will Grigg missing that many chances because we haven't created.
Well, I can only think when he first arrived, there was a handful.
He had a couple, yeah.
But likewise, I mean, I think you've got to still point the finger at the delivery sometimes into those players, and there has been an issue, you know, certainly this season and to a certain extent last season. Passing the final ball into the box hasn't been precision. It hasn't been the balls that those players would want. I mean, I watched Grigg. I remember Oxford. I think the Oxford game away. It wasn't through lack of effort. It was the ball was either behind him, it was over the top of him.
If you look at some of the finishes like Accrington away last year, Walsall at home, and I'm not sticking up for Grigg because I think his record since he's come is poor for the amount of money was spent on him. But last year we had Gooch who cut inside, ran down blind alleys, generally didn't get the balls in, and particularly in the second half of the season. McGeady cuts in to shoot and quite often score, so that's justified. But we weren't like getting to the byline and playing balls in. And if you look at Wyke and Grigg's showreel, like the goals that they score, you know, especially Wyke, you know, glancing headers across, getting there in front of his man, I know we had 34 crosses against Oxford. I can't remember 34, but we had 3 shots on target. But I think maybe that's why Jack Ross was looking at a different system to have more width and
trying to get the ball in the danger area.
The ball into the danger area, because we did pass the ball around a lot, and then obviously teams were parking the bus, so we couldn't open them up, But Griggs in our armoury, and I think he will come good just because he's an excellent player at that level. But I think having McNulty there is the best thing we can do, because it's like, well, if you're not doing it, this guy's going to get a chance, and you've got to take your chance. It's the same with the goalkeepers. McLaughlin was probably our best player last year, but at the same time he didn't have any competition in training. And I think sort of if you look at the positions where they have strengthened, like the formation apart, I think we have strengthened we've still got a bit of work to do before the end of the month.
Well, I think the spine is strengthened. I mean, one always talks about the spine, and I think with a goalkeeper, with Willis, with Dobson, with McNulty, there's an argument they have strengthened that spine of the side, and and all 4 of those players. Willis had a bit of a blip, if you like, at Ipswich, but other than that, he hasn't really done much wrong. Dobson's looked great.
Obviously got Ethan and Embleton.
And exactly. So and we've been talking about McNulty and how sharp he looks. So I think that is promising. I think the bottom line is it's to solve this dilemma of getting the ball to the forwards, and the goals will come. And I mean, as Benno was saying at the weekend, you watched the goal, the equaliser at Ipswich, and it's not rocket science. It's not difficult. As soon as you start pressing and put pressure on defenders, they make mistakes.
At this level, for sure.
Portsmouth, obviously the team this weekend, we've got quite a lot of history with them. There's 5 meetings last season.
In the last 12 months.
It's actually less than that. It was December we first met them as
well. Yeah,
so
true.
It's 5 meetings in about 8 months. Portsmouth, though, played them 3 out of 4 meetings by the time we're finished on Saturday at the Stadium Light, which is crazy as well. Bit of a rivalry between the 2 clubs, it's fair to say. There seems to be a bit of animosity. We all remember the events last season with Luke 09 as well, which were humorous, I suppose, especially when you win.
They're always, I'm not quite sure why that animosity's come about actually between. I mean, if you go back to when Portsmouth were in the Premier League, the games down at Fratton Park, David Myler breaking his leg, and get players being sent off in those games. There's always been this. There's always been this sort of fractious relationship between the two, and yet, I mean, you talk to Portsmouth fans, and when we've been down in Portsmouth for games, I mean, they are as passionate as Sunderland fans. I mean, in one sense, maybe that's why, they understand, the history of the club, their club, and they are as sort of, there's no indifference with Portsmouth fans. They're as sort of...
They're quite similar cities in a way as well, like, big ports, but like not the biggest city around there. And but obviously it's because both teams have like fallen from grace dramatically. Thankfully, we haven't sort of fallen from grace as far as what they did, where they kind of like almost could have gone out of the Football League entirely. But yeah, I guess there's no other team in the league. You sort of look at Sunderland and Portsmouth as the 2 biggest clubs, Obviously, there's other clubs with history like Bolton, who are obviously really struggling at the minute, and Ipswich. But I think, league titles and stuff, the 2 clubs are big. But like I was saying before, I think they were both expected to go up last year, and neither did. So here we are again.
I mean, it's interesting to talk about big clubs. I was interested at Ipswich. I think it's quite funny. I mean, it's that Ipswich trying to reclaim their sort of status, if you like, having fallen from grace. 1957, the last time they were at this level. Well, they put the 3 stars now above their crest. It's almost like to say that we are a big club. We are the sort of, this is our history. And it's funny because I'm surprised that Portsmouth and Sunderland in a way haven't done that, because it's almost sort of the perfect opportunity now to reclaim that history and say this is where we've come from and this is where we should be. But you're absolutely right in terms of the 2 big clubs in this division. I still think, touch wood, I think Sunderland and Portsmouth will be the 2 that go up automatically. Because despite the start, I still do think that these 2 are the 2 that are geared up now to go back up.
Portsmouth obviously lost 2 big players as well in the summer, Jamal Lowe and Matt Clark. You think that makes them weaker?
Well, no, they've signed Marquis and they've signed the lad from Rangers and
Harness.
So
it was brilliant.
Possibly not. I mean, I think they will be. And Kenny Jackett's no mug. I mean, he's managed at this level. And he's done.
He knows the league. He's irritating, but he knows it, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, the players play in the way the fans behaved with the 09 last year. They're almost like sort of playing, you know, they're emulating him as a manager, really his attitude. But you know, we've got to learn to. We still haven't got round that in League One. You know, we still haven't learned to fight with the big boys, which is why I still think we need to bring in a massive centre half before the end of the window. I think like last year the two centre halves, you know, did the best for us, but I think in the summer we needed to sign two. We've signed one. I like Ozturk, but I think over the season he can't play.
He won't last that number of games.
Week in, week out, you know. And
I think you're right.
I think that's our problem.
Nice.
Yeah, exactly.
They've become too nice in this league.
And we had a lot of small players as well. I mean, obviously, Honeyman and Catamol and Oviedo have gone, but there's still. We just need to be bigger and stronger, which at this level means that you end up losing a bit of quality. But if you can't get the ball down to pass it because you haven't got the ball because you're not physically strong enough, you need more pace and power.
But this level, you know, you lose it, you win it back because that's the nature of the league, and I think that was actually almost evident last night at Accrington.
It was, yeah.
Become basketball games.
But I think someone made a comment to me at Accrington. Jack Ross has got to throw out the coaching manual and learn that League One doesn't follow the rules, and you know, to a certain extent, I can sort of empathise with that.
Well, we've seen that at Wickham away last year, didn't we? That wasn't like a sort of a game of football that stuck to the rules of football.
No.
You know, and we didn't even get like any sort of cohesion where we strung 2 or 3 passes together until like the 65th minute or something. You know, it's, you've got to learn how to mix it. I think that's because he doesn't know the league. He should now. He's obviously like a young up and coming manager, and you can sort of say, well, if they get to like, I think when he's up against the likes of Kenny Jackett, it's like it's an interesting, you know,
well, you mentioned about Kenny Jackett and the way the players reflect the manager, and it's often the case. I think, you know, Oxford's players reflected Carl Robinson. I mean, and so on. A manager sometimes, his personality actually is injected into the team, and you find that the teams play to that sort of style. And at the moment, we you know, you've got quite a sort of erudite manager in Jack Ross, who's quite sort of urbane and stands on the touchline. You know, it almost looks like his team is reflecting that, rather than sometimes being a little bit more demonstrative and being a little bit more sort of physical when it comes to this sort of game.
There's lots of little things. I mean, like last year, we didn't really. You've seen the way that other teams reacted to referees' decisions and got in the ref's ear, which like I hate to see. And managers, you know, classic managers like Clough would be like, don't argue with the referee, shake his hand. But like if the other team are doing it and they're starting to get more decisions because they're like over to the referee all the time, whereas we were kind of like, oh yeah, okay, and we weren't. And obviously, I think having Honeyman as a captain, as a young guy, it's often the captain that goes over to complain to the ref. So I think we'll get that more from Ledbetter because he's older. But I think there's a lot of things at League One level that we needed to kind of like wise up, be more physical, be more streetwise, be in the ref's ear more, mix it with them. You know, there's a lot of things happen off the ball. Unfortunately, when we reacted to them, like Max Powers sending off at Bradford, then we ended up getting, you know, we retaliated. I got there in the end, yeah. And then we got punished for it, you know.
Yeah, and I think it's a learning curve again. I mean, Lyndon Gooch is maybe a good example where when things are going against Sunderland, players actually react in the wrong way. They get too wound up and start making silly mistakes, start doing silly things.
And then you go down to their level.
And then you get to their level, and you know, teams in League One. I mean, Chris Maguire is a classic example of someone who knows this league, knows how to play it.
And
he's very savvy. He enjoys it. And he doesn't allow himself to get wound up in that sense. He winds everyone else up and brings it back for Sunderland's sake.
How do we see the manager setting up at the weekend? We talked about the 4 at the back. Midfield's the most interesting thing for me. What he does with them several midfield options he's got is, it's almost a minefield. I mean, I wouldn't like to be in his position.
No.
Between Max Power, Grant Ledbetter, Dobson, Dylan McGeoch if he's fit, Embleton.
There's a lot of people there to choose from.
There are a lot, and I think I mentioned before Dobson. I like Dobson.
I think Dobson needs to start for his energy and strength.
And I actually think it's interesting. I really don't know what he's going to do. It's still a big quandary, but it's something he's got to get right. But I thought Max Power played really well at Accrington, and Dobson and Power as the two I wouldn't be averse to. I mean, I think Power's got a lot of energy. He's looking back. He's looking like the player that Sunderland thought they'd signed a year ago, because the injuries sort of derailed him, and sending us off, I think, really did knock his confidence. But he looked good last like that, because he looked like he's back in the swing, and with Dobson there as well, I think that's quite a nice
Do you think
two.
4-4-2?
Well, I mean, Gary Bennett at Accrington kept saying 4-2-4. I mean, I can see where he's coming from, and I think that is. I wouldn't be averse to that. I think it's got to be 4 at the back.
I think as long as it starts with 4, I'm not really bothered about the other numbers, to be honest with you. I think we've got enough quality. Like
that's fluid, isn't it?
Yeah, but I do think that, like, the first game of the season, he didn't pick our strongest team. He picked the team to play the system, or the team that he thought deserved it. I mean, he's done it a couple of times. That he probably did it against Charlton the first game of last season. He played like a lot of young players. I think he needs to pick the strongest team to play against, you know, Portsmouth, which are the real deal for like a League One team, like all over the park. You know, you've got like big players. I mean, it's interesting whether he'd use Ledbetter, because he doesn't seem to. I think if you're going to have Ledbetter and you need a passer, or McGeoch, he doesn't tend to kind of bring them on later on in a game, where you think, well, you've got that on the bench, it's not working, change it round. He tends to stick with that player unless they get injured.
I mean, I'd like to see, ideally, I'd like to see an attacking 11 to start, get in front and actually start making statements about we're at home, we're leading, we're going to win these games at home, and put Portsmouth on the back foot. I mean, the last thing they want to do is give Portsmouth the opportunity to take the lead in the 15th minute, and suddenly that changes the game and the atmosphere, and they need a strong, strident start, and I think he needs to put players in that 11 to start who are of that ilk.
I think when we go for it, you know, like Doncaster at home last year was a big game. Obviously, there were no mugs. You know, they got the playoffs just the same as us, and just narrowly lost out. Otherwise, we would have played them in the final. But when we played Doncaster at home last year, we just went for it, and it was quite an easy win.
Yeah,
you know,
2-0 was that?
Yeah, it's just like, well, why? You know, like
but comfortable.
Yeah, like why have all the anxiety?
Arguably one of the best performances of the season.
Exactly, and when we took the lead, we went and got another goal. Whereas last year, the reason we drew a lot of those games 1-1 or drew them, like we'd actually
getting the second goal,
and most of them were taking the lead. We didn't come from behind. Obviously, we did it on occasion, but the majority of the time we were leading. And then we had this thing where, like, we played all right, and then we took the lead, and it was like, oh, we've got something to defend now. It's like, no, get a second goal, and then they'll have to come at us, then pick them off. I know it's easy to sit here and say, but I think we have got the players to do that. And I think, you know, like traditionally we used to come out when we had good teams under Reid, and different managers would come out and would win the game in the first 20 minutes, you know, get a goal, and then because you know that the longer it goes on, the crowd are going to get frustrated, and which can become a negative in some ways on the pitch, because the players, especially at this level, there's a lot of players that aren't used to playing in front of this many people, you know, and then it starts transmitting onto the pitch. But I think we need to be more positive and more aggressive, and go for the wins. And I think the wins will come.
Okay, thanks for coming on, guys. Nick, obviously we'll listen to your commentary on BBC Newcastle, and Martyn, go to the ALS cafe before our match day, get yourself a bacon sandwich. Thanks for coming on. Hopefully we'll be talking about a win next week, and actually 2 games next week to watch it as well. So, hopefully that'll be a nice 6 points, and we'll forget about 1-1 draws and negativity, and we'll all be happy.
2 wins in a row, that'll do us.
That'll be lovely, and then a win at the weekend.